This unboxing of the Nintendo Switch 2 is different. And that's because, besides being filmed in a movie-like forest, next you'll also see the very first startup from scratch and the initial setup step by step of this Nintendo Switch 2 filmed entirely in the middle of a river that looks like it's straight out of a Zelda game. I assure you that the synergy between this portable console and the nature you're about to see works really well. And please, someone help me identify this strange and slimy creature that seemed like it wanted to play Mario Kart. You'll get a better look at it later. But here we go with the unboxing of this Nintendo Switch 2 in an idyllic setting that suits it perfectly. It's been a few months since I pre-ordered this Switch 2 so I could review it on this channel. Why choose such a unique setting compared to everything else on YouTube right now? It's just that, aside from the fact that it's my philosophy, this is how I personally like to make videos, combining the most beautiful nature with the most cutting-edge technology. It's because I think this company, Nintendo, when creating their consoles and also their games, takes nature into account a lot. I actually think it's something quite Japanese. And, well, as you're already seeing in this unboxing of the Nintendo Switch 2, the outside of the box is very similar to the first version. Maybe it's just a little bit bigger. But from the very first moment, you can tell it's a Nintendo product. Very well finished, with several manuals even inside the box itself, just like the first version had. And here we go with the new Joy-Con 2 in this fluorescent orange color. This would be the right one. And in your hand, it feels extremely ergonomic, maybe even more than the first version. It also has a black plastic with a slightly non-slip texture. It feels kind of porous. And this is especially appreciated when you're going to spend many hours playing and holding these controllers. And there is the sensor that proves it can be used as a mouse, although we'll obviously see this in a later video. As for the ZR and R triggers, they work very well. The travel's good, but I would have liked a bit more travel on the ZR, although the vibration has also been improved. On the other hand, the joystick itself is covered in rubber that also makes it non-slip. Here you can see it in some microscopic shots, and it makes it harder for it to slip, for example, when making a sudden movement. And like in the previous generation, it's also clickable. And now let's move on to the left controller, in this case blue, which is also quite striking. In that quadruple row, you have the LEDs to check the battery. And interestingly, the buttons are more flush with the chassis of the Joy-Con 2 itself. Even though they feel recessed, they can be pressed just as easily as the ones that stick out. In short, these are controllers that have evolved to be a bit more ergonomic, a bit slimmer, and they've added an extra button. And in addition, that feature, which I think can be very useful for using them as a mouse, even so, I think the controllers, for example, from the PS5 are a step above, not only in the trigger travel, which is much longer, but also in terms of vibration. And this is looking at papers, and this HDMI cable, by the way, is also a very good quality in terms of its construction. And here are these adapters to attach the Joy-Con to. Honestly, they're very well made and always have the details of the Nintendo logo. When it comes to putting them on, it's extremely easy. This is something I like. Nintendo makes accessories that you intuitively know how to attach without any problems. Here's an accessory much like the previous versions, used to combine both Joy-Con 2. However, once again, they use piano black, this piano black finish, which scratches and gets dirty very easily. Honestly, you can tell they've really cut costs here. Take a look at this part, which I actually liked, and that's the magnetic attachment on these Joy-Con 2. If it was pretty easy to attach them in the first version, now it's even easier. And just by bringing them close to the area with the same color, they attach magnetically, and honestly, they do so in a pretty solid way. And let's move on with the rest of this unboxing. First, we have a USB-C to USB-C cable, once again with the Nintendo logo, and honestly, it's pretty thick. It feels sturdy. And it also comes with a charger that, according to the company itself, has a power output of 60 watts. I'm actually glad they include it in the box, since as you know, this channel mainly reviews smartphones, and there are some that cost 3 times more than this Nintendo Switch 2 and don't even include it. And here is the dock to connect it to the TV. That would be the LED, which indicates that it's connected successfully. And, well, it also feels pretty cheap. On this side, it has two USB-A connectors, and on the back, just like in the first version, it has that piano black finish that I like so much. You know, I'm being ironic. On the bottom, it feels very well ventilated with those rubber feet as well, which make it non-slip. And just like in the previous generation, this plastic plate makes it clear that they've saved quite a bit of money here. But anyway, here you can also see the connectors it comes with, both the HDMI and the Ethernet port, as well as the power input through USB Type-C. Also, this dock includes a fan to help cool the console better when it's connected to a monitor or a TV. And now let's get to the most important part of this Nintendo Switch 2. And this is where the heart of this Nintendo Switch 2 would be. Because even though the thickness remains the same as the previous generation, that is 13.9 millimeters, the screen is actually quite a bit larger. It's a 7.9-inch LCD screen, which means it's about 1.6 times bigger than the first generation Nintendo Switch screen. And I like that they keep paying attention to these little details, like the rubber pads that help prevent it from sliding, for example, on a surface. And also, this kickstand feels pretty solid and has firm resistance, and you can leave it in any position, just like with the previous generation. Also, the micro SD, as you can see, is hidden under this kickstand. And now let's move on to the ports. It has a USB-C as well as those holes that are used to place it in the dock, for example. And it has two speakers, stereo speakers, which sound incredibly good. And by the way, as you can see in these close-up shots, it has a kind of slit. I imagine it's so that not too much dust gets in. On the right side, in the same color as the Joy-Con 2, and here in this part is where most of the buttons and ports would be, to the right side of the mono microphone. And just like in the previous version, it has this port to insert physical games. Also, it's made of aluminum and rubber. It has a second USB-C, a 3.5 millimeter jack connector, and those vents are where the cooling vent for the fan in this Nintendo Switch 2 is. That spot is the brightness sensor, and the volume buttons stick out slightly from the case. They're actually easy to find by touch. On the other hand, the power button, meaning the on and off button, is recessed. It's recessed into the chassis itself. And by the way, the screen comes with a pre-installed screen protector that Nintendo recommends not removing. However, the total weight of the console has increased because we've gone from 399 grams from the first generation to 534 grams in the new one, which is a little over half a kilo. Although, I must say it still feels pretty light in the hand. And, as promised, let's go through the initial setup of this Nintendo Switch 2 step by step in a wild environment like this, like you've never seen before. And the setup of this Nintendo Switch 2 is very similar to the first version. However, some dynamics, some fonts, some colors, some lights, details related to the interface have changed. And not only when starting up this Nintendo Switch 2 for the first time, but also when using it. Although we'll see that later in the video when I do the full review of this Nintendo Switch 2. And I'm already in the middle of the river. What is the initial setup like? Honestly, I like that Nintendo explains step by step what you need to do graphically when connecting the console, for example, or when removing the Joy-Con 2. It even shows you with light cues that match the exact color of the controller you need to remove. Honestly, everything feels extremely intuitive and very well explained right from the console itself. Also, you can tell from the very beginning that the processor is much more powerful. The initial loading times are practically non-existent. But all this help, for example, also makes it really practical for those parents who want to give this Nintendo Switch 2 to their children as a gift. Or even if they're not very tech savvy, they could set it up themselves and also configure the parental controls, which is a specific limited mode for children. Therefore, no matter how old you are, I think anyone will perfectly understand how this Nintendo Switch 2 works from the very first moment. And the setup is now complete. Look, now I'll press the home button, and this is how you start a Nintendo Switch 2 for the first time.
Dos.
And as for this strange and slimy creature, I mentioned at the beginning my suspicion is that it was attracted by the heat of the console while I was recording some shots for this video and crawled up here. I guess these are the risks you have to take when you record in unusual places like this forest. Luckily, with a bit of alcohol, you can clean the case of the Switch 2 really well. Well, at this point, let's see how much this Nintendo Switch 2 costs. And as of today, it's not available. I bought it for a little over 500 euros with Mario Kart. Of course, I don't know when you'll be watching this video. It's very likely that they'll have more units in stock. That only means success for Nintendo. I'll leave both the Amazon link and the AliExpress link down below in the video description, with AliExpress usually being a bit cheaper. This isn't a review unit, meaning Nintendo didn't give or lend me this console to try out. I bought it myself so I could make a different kind of video and test it in these environments. And if I see that you like this video and ask me for it, I'll do a very thorough review testing this console in places you've never seen before that are honestly a bit risky. Anyway, as I mentioned in the video, I think the synergy with nature really suits this console, and it also matches Nintendo's philosophy. And now, I hope you enjoyed this rather unusual Nintendo Switch 2 unboxing. If you liked this video and want to thank me in some way, subscribe if you haven't already. And leave me a like so I can keep recording in these amazing environments. And now, see you in the next video. Take care and see you soon.